Shalom! Right, brilliant lesson ahead. Really, so many wonderful concepts drawn together when it comes to revealing that Moshiach is Yeshua and is Moshiach. So this was the last slide, I think, from the previous lesson, where we covered this topic of Moshiach being Yeshua. There's a couple of numbers that we will be looking at again on this particular slide. Hopefully we will look in this lesson. I plan to. The first one is the first light blue text box, number 1. Yeshu plus David plus Yosef comes to 496. That's highlighted in red. We will have a look at that number. From the last lesson, that number, there was a lot of significance with that number. I will just go and point it out. So we had this slide last lesson, and we can see in point F that the luminary, which is called the moon, the luminary, these are 3 nouns that describe the moon. So Ha-Me'or, the luminary, Ha-Katan, and the small one, Ha-Lila of the night. They come to 496, and we've said that that is point G. The same as Red with Beautiful Eyes, which is an appellation for King David. Okay, so he was called Red with Beautiful Eyes. And we also looked at, if you go down to point L, we looked at that 496 is also Malkuth, which means kingdom. It's also Hag HaSukkoth, which is the festival of Sukkoth. And all these are very messianic concepts in themselves. And it's Yeshua, which is 386 plus Yeshua Moshiach, 110. That comes to 496. It's the average value of all 5 books of the Torah, things like that. So that's what we looked at last lesson. That's basically the information that we need to go forward. We will come back at that only briefly, but I just wanted to remind you that this is an extremely significant number in terms of revelation. And in terms of final revelation, in terms of final redemption, because we are trying to attain the level of Moshiach ben David. Okay, another number on there that we will come back to again, it comes up in the gematria of what we were going through today, is point 3. Yeshua, the ordinal, 53, plus David, 24, plus Joseph, 48, comes to 125. And we pointed out in point 5 of that, 125 steps of the ladder to rectify the soul. So this whole process of descending, our soul descending into our body, and it's got to attain 125 levels on that ladder, the Sulam, and this is like the ladder that Yaakov saw stretching from earth up to heaven. So according to Rabbi Ashlag, there's 125 steps involved in that because there's 5 levels of our soul and they're all included. That means they're all included within one another. So the level of our nefesh is included with the level of our ruach, which is our spirit, which is included with the level of our neshama, which is our soul. Okay, so it goes on like that. 5 levels of our soul all included is 5 times 5. And then there's 5 worlds, if you like. So that's times by another 5, which is 125. So there where you get the 125 from, basically. And that's the ladder that is on the ground and going to earth. And on that ladder of all the angels that represent the different exiles that we're subject to, i.e. our soul is descended into our body. And that's synonymous with us descending into exile. And then we've got to work our way up from that to the top of the ladder, basically. Okay, and this is us rectifying ourselves. The whole purpose of rectification. And this is something that we will go through today. We need to get on very quickly. So we need to look, first of all, at the concept of descending. Okay, so we've got this here. We touched on some of these concepts in the last lesson, but I'm going to just clarify them. But when I'm saying clarify them, I mean ultra simplified big concepts. You know, this is ultra simplified, big concepts, big Kabbalistic concepts, broken down to the absolute skeleton, to the bare bones, if you like. As far as I'm able to comprehend some of these really big concepts, it's broken down to the absolute bare bones. So this is what's called the tree of life. the 10 Sfiroth, and you can actually see there's actually 11 there, because there's one Sfiroth called Da'ath, and that is it's got a dashed line instead of a solid line, and it's under Kether, the one at the top. Okay, so that's what we call the tree of life, the Kabbalistic tree of life, and it's basically the name Yod He Vav He. It is the name Yod He Vav He. There's absolutely no basic about it. This is a Kabbalistic representation. The tree of life is the name Yod He Vav He. Okay, so these are different aspects to that name, different manifestations of that name, if you like. Okay, so I won't go complicating myself and talking about things that I'm not 100% sure about. So let's go and talk about the things that I am sure of. This is the dark blue box. So we're going to now go over some of these concepts of descent and ascent, because this is the whole experience that we are experiencing at this time. We have had our soul has descended into our bodies, and we've got to bring about a unity between that soul and body in order to receive a revelation of the name Yod He Vav He. Okay, so let's go. This is at a microcosmic level. Let's go and have a look at the macrocosmic level of this. So the exile of supernal Da'ath. So that's that dashed line that's, it is a spherot, but not really a spheroth. Okay, of its own. It basically is the outer aspect of Kether. Okay, that which means crown. That's the top one. So I'm just going to read off this. Okay, because I've just made it easy. You can follow and read, and then if you need to pause and go through it yourself and try to catch up on filling any gaps that you can, and then do that. So the exile of supernal Da'ath. Da'ath equals 474. Okay, this is the soul level of Moshiach. Da'ath descends into the Erev Rav, and Erev Rav also equals 474. So your Erev Rav is the mixed multitude that left Egypt with Bnei Yisrael. These were they have an origin, basically. They came from Adam, the 130 years it was separated from Eve. These were created through sexual relations that Adam had during that time. So there were defects within the Erev Rav that needed correction. Them going into Egypt was part of that correction. But there were two aspects that needed to be corrected. One aspect of it was corrected in Egypt, but there was another aspect that needed correcting, an aspect that causes descent. Okay, read, I think, is how it's said. I'm talking from memory now, so I don't want to complicate it too much, but there's an aspect to the Erev Rav that's still yet unrectified, and that aspect that's unrectified is called descent. It's the power that they have to cause spiritual descent. And that is exactly why Moshiach, who was the one who wanted to bring them out and rectify them, has had to descend as a consequence of that. So he is descended. He was never allowed to come into Eretz Yisrael. He was buried on Mount Nebo, which is outside in the plains in the land of Moab. And this really represents the fact that Moshiach, who is supernal Da'ath, which is our knowledge, supernal knowledge, and through Da'ath it's our consciousness, really, our consciousness of the name Yod He Vav He. So this is the sphere, if you like, where we are conscious of that name, Yod He Vav He, and this is ultimately what is in exile. Our ability to be truly conscious of the name, of true reality, okay, of the name Yod He Vav He. There is only one true reality, it's the name Yod He Vav He, but we're not conscious of it. Okay, this is what has descended. It's descended into like a limited consciousness, restricted consciousness, and that's what exile is. It's when we are not when we're very restricted in our understand and in our knowledge of the name Yod He Vav He, and we're not even conscious of it. We're conscious more of evil. We're conscious of darkness. We're conscious of external forces, and all these are really not true reality. Okay, so this is what the whole thing of exile is. So supernal da'ath is exiled. And that's our ability to be truly conscious of the name Yod He Vav He is what's in exile. It's in exile in this concept called Erev Rav, the mixed multitude. It's in a process that needs refining. So the descent into it is ultimately in order to refine that. And that process of refining that will be, the end result will be redemption of supernal da'ath. And that ultimately means, what does that mean? That means that we will be conscious of the name Yod He Vav He. It's ultimately that our consciousness will be redeemed. Okay, so we will be aware and conscious of divinity and conscious of true reality. So there's this experience of descending into exile and then working up the 125 steps on the ladder to the final place of redemption. Okay, so that's the first bullet point. Second bullet point, the outer aspect of the inner Torah of Moshe descends into Erev exile. This happened 3,293 years ago, and this is this year, 2021. So when we're talking about the outer aspect of the Torah, okay, we're really talking about the outer aspect of the inner Torah, because if you go down to bullet point 3, the outer dimension of Kether crown is Da'ath. So there's an outer dimension to Kether, which is called Da'ath, knowledge. So it's really the outer inner Torah, because Kether is represented the inner Torah, the wonder, the Pella, the inner meaning of the Torah is Kether. So Da'ath is the outer inner Torah, if you understand what I mean. There's a simpler way of putting this, and the simple way of putting it is that in bullet point 3, the 13 attributes as revealed in Exodus, that is the name Yod, ultimately the name Yod He Vav He. So there's two revelations of the name Yod He Vav. There's two revelations of the 13 attributes. One is the revelation that we found in Exodus, which is this week's Torah portion. I think it's even today's Torah portion, where Moshe's put in the cleft of the rock, and then the glory of Yod He Vav He passes by, and he's only allowed to see him from the back. Okay, cannot see him face to face, he can only see him from the back. This is the revelation of the name Yod He Vav He, the 13 attributes of mercy as revealed to Moshe at this point. Okay, which this is the whole Torah of Moshe, by the way. These 13 attributes of mercy, this is the whole Torah of Moshe. But it's the inner, it's the outer inner, it's the outer inner aspect of the Torah, because it's a revelation of the name Yod He Vav He, which is the entire inner aspect of the Torah. Okay, the inner, the complete reality, the complete inner dimension of the Torah is the name Yod He Vav He, but this is the outer aspect to that revelation. I hope you're following me anyway. So that's the outer inner dimension to the Torah. That's in exile, in the exile of the Erev Rav. Okay, so bullet point 4, this is the stick of Yehuda, what's called the stick of Yehuda in the book of Ezekiel. So Moshiach which is Moshiach ben David, this is what the Vilna Gaon calls the stick of Yehuda. He calls that Moshiach ben David, which doesn't actually tally if in terms of the final revelation of Moshiach ben David. Okay, because for one reason, the final version of Moshiach ben David is a face-to-face, the 50th gate of understanding. But this is the way that this is novel to me. This is the way I understand what the Vilna Gaon said and reconciling it to all these concepts, okay? So the stick of Yehuda is Moshiach ben David, but when it's unrectified. So there's two spellings of Moshiach ben David. There's one where it includes it's rectified with an additional yud in the name David, and there's one without an additional yud in the David so there's one where it's just spelled Daleth, Vav, Daleth, David or Dawid, whichever way you want to pronounce it. So that is the level of the stick of Yehuda, the unrectified Moshiach ben David. Okay, so I've put there indicated when spelled without a yud, because that comes to 424. Now, if we add 50 to that, representing the 50th gate, we get to the 474. So that's the difference between Moshiach ben Yosef and attaining that supernal da'ath. Is the difference is attaining the 50th gate of understanding. Okay. And I've put bullet point 5. 50 represents the 50th gate of understanding, which is Sha'ar Hanun. Okay, I've covered this in a couple of previous teachings. So 50th gate of understanding, there's basically 50 gates of understanding. Moshe only attained the 49th gate of understanding. This was the back-to-back with the name Yod He Vei Fe. That's why you saw him from the back. Okay, you couldn't see him face to face and live, right? But this will be fulfilled when we fully rectified. Okay, we will attain that 50th gate of understanding, and we will be able to look, we will be able to perceive Yod He Vav He face to face. Okay, this is the process of rectification. This is what we are trying to attain. And the soul of Moshe in exile at this time, as Moshiach ben Yosef, is going through a process of rectification that will bring us to that final revelation of the name Yod He Vav He, and it brings us into a face-to-face revelation with the name Yod He Vav He. So I've put there, Moshe only attained the 49th gate of understanding, back-to-back with the name Yod He Vav He. He needs to attain the 50th gate, soul level of Moshiach ben David, rectified. So this is when Moshiach ben David includes the letter Yod. Okay, so to fully overcome Erev Rav and rectify Da'ath, supernal Da'ath. That's my distillation, if you like, on some major Kabbalistic concepts. That's the way I've been able to see through the numbers and marry that up to what I know of highly Kabbalistic concepts. I can't say that I'm fully fluent with all the Kabbalistic concepts, but my understanding, what I have been able to glean numerically and also conceptually through understanding what I have studied regards these Kabbalistic concepts, that's my distillation of it. That's my whole understanding of Moshe descending into the Erev Rav and what is ultimately going to be accomplished, and then marrying it up with every last thing that I have so far been able to understand, like I say, what the Vilna Gaon said, and all these concepts about the stick of Yehuda and the stick of Yosef that need to be brought together. Okay, interestingly, the purple text box at the bottom, Rabbi Nachman states, wisdom, understanding and knowledge equals 620, which is Keter. So Chochmah being a Da'ath, it comes to 620, okay, which is Keter, crown. So that's the one at the top. That's when... that's where really what we're aiming for. We'll see. We're going to go talk about that next anyway. But basically, the Keter is the level of Moshiach ben Yosef, which has then descended. Okay, so let's go and have a look and see if we can get that connection between Da'ath and Keter, the outer inner aspect of the Torah and the inner aspect of the Torah, which is the name Yod He Vav He, the 13 attributes of mercy. Okay, so let's go and have a look at it anyway. So, bullet point 1 then, the first bullet point. Moshe incarnates and elevates to the level of Moshiach ben Yosef, who is Yeshua. through being taught by Eliyahu Hanavi. So Moshe's soul fully incarnated, what's called a Gilgal. There's a difference between a Gilgal and an Ibur, an impregnation. So every generation we have somebody who is an Ibur, as far as I'm able to understand through reading, through the Kabbalistic concepts, there's an Ibur every single generation, what's called a generational Moshe. Okay, these are not a full incarnation of the whole soul of Moshe. They've got a different root soul, but they've got an impregnation of the soul of Moshe within them. And this is something that they're very much connected to. This is as far as I'm able to understand. So there's two different words. There's an Ibor, an impregnation, and a Gilgal, a full incarnation of the soul of Moshe. So as far as numerically, what we can see from last lesson, we pointed this out very, very, very clearly. Numerically, there's a very profound relationship between Moshe and Yeshua. Okay, that points to the fact that Yeshua is an incarnation, a full Gilgal of Moshe. So he came in, don't forget this was the level of supernal da'ath. So his soul was at supernal da'ath. And then it needed to be elevated up to the level of the inner Torah. Okay, which is the level of Moshiach ben Yosef, which is the soul level of Yechida. Okay, so Moshiach ben Yosef is Yeshua through being taught by Eliyahu Hanavi, which is John the Baptist, who is the Rav Lach. Okay, if we go down to the bottom text box, this is all covered in my teaching by Exile, by the way. If you're in any debate or don't understand that John the Baptist was Eliyahu Hanavi, who was the Rav Lach, then you need to go and watch the first video I did about Exile Decoded, the secrets of the Moshiach finally revealed. Okay, it goes through how... I'll just quickly put up one statement to show this because I think it's very interesting, but I'll do it after I've read this verse at the bottom. It says, "But the Lord was angry with me because of you," this is Moshe speaking, "and he did not listen to me. And the Lord said to me, it is enough for you. Speak to me no more regarding this matter." Okay, so that word, it is enough for you, is Rav Lach. And Exile, and not just Exile, the sages as well say that means it's a teacher for you, because Rav means teacher and Lach is for you. Okay, so this is saying that when, in Exil's commentary on Be'at Chanan, which he analyses this verse, he's saying that Moshe will finally reappear, and this is indicated in the last verse of Torah, Deuteronomy 34:12, I do believe. I go through the whole teaching on this, so I'm not going to go through it again. I'm just going to point out one particular section for you that's very interesting. Okay, so I've just quickly pulled together this slide. So Exile said the term Rav Lach, it is enough for you, can also mean that Moshe is a teacher. Rav means teacher. Moshe is desolate. This is a state of desolation until he is taught by Eliyahu Hanavi, who raises him up to the level of the final Redeemer, Moshiach ben David. Okay, so this is talking about Moshiach. He will ultimately become Moshiach ben David, but before then there's another stage. Moshe gets elevated up to Moshiach ben Yosef. Okay, so Moshiach becomes Yeshua, and then he descends also. And the reason why we've got we know that Yochanan is Eliyahu Hanavi, because Yeshua said that for those who believe he is Eliyahu Hanavi. Okay, so we do know that Yeshua's own words said that. But there's also evidence. This is in Hebrew, John 3:30. He must increase and I must decrease. So, hu yelech ha luch werav. Anyway, it's there, highlighted in red, basically. You can see lach, rav, and lach. Rav Lach. So there's two connections. One is connecting back to this concept of the Rav Lach, to say that John the Baptist is the Rav Lach, the teacher for Moshe. Okay? But also, that is also connected the Yelech Holoch is also connected to Psalm 126, where you've got holoch yelech. It's the same words, just in the different order. Hu yelech, holech, haloch. Sorry, that is verse 5 and 6. So it will be the beginning of verse 6. Psalm 126:6 is haloch yelech. So there's a connection there, which is obviously he will go along weeping, carrying the valuable seas. He will come back with song, carrying his sheaths. So you've got that whole aspect of descent, but coming back, okay? And this whole concept of the sheaths, which is related to Yosef's sheaths, which is related to the raising of Yeshua's name. In the last text box, for example, we've got Yemach Shemo Uzkro, may his name be erased and his memory. The ordinal of that is 121, which is exactly the same as the word for sheaves used in the prophecy where there were binding sheaves in the field and all the sheaves bowed down to Yosef's sheath. So that word there in that particular verse is alumim, which comes 121, which is the ordinal for may his name be erased and his memory. And the initial letters of that spell Yeshu, which is the concept of Moshiach ben Yosef descended into the husks of Esav, an Edomite exile, which is the current status of Moshe. We're in Edomite exile. It's actually the soul of Moshe who came who was incarnated fully as Yeshua, and then is also descended into this exile. Okay, so let's just make sure we've covered all that. Lost it now. Let's have a look. Right, so that's connected to may his name be erased in his memory. The initial letters of that spell Yeshu, which is the name of Moshiach ben Yosef in exile. Okay, and if you add those both together, the ordinal, which is 121, and the regular, which is 643, it comes to 764, which is 4 times 191. And 191 is the ordinal for all the names of the Moshiach, Enon, Menachem, Shiloh, and Hanina. They come to 121. So there's loads of connections there that are telling you about Yochanan the Immerser, Moshe, Yochanan the Immerser being Eliyahu Hanavi, Moshe being Yeshua, and then descending again into the Erev Rav. Sorry, not into Erev Rav, the Edomite exile. I've had to go through that clearly. I didn't even plan on doing that, but it's such an important fundamental concept that we've got to be very clear about all these concepts. This is something that the Arizal gave. The Arizal in his commentary on Ve'at Chanan clearly and emphatically showed without any question whatsoever that Yeshua, Moshe reincarnated as Yeshua. That whole commentary of Arizal is basically Moshe reincarnated as Yeshua. That's what it said. But there's another process until we get to final redemption. He has to descend again, go into Edomite exile, and ascend up to the level from this Edomite exile up to the level of Moshiach ben David. And that's what we're in the current process of doing. But it's nice to be able to see all these things, how all these concepts connect up, and it's just one concept. Okay? It's one ultimate concept, the name Yod He Vav He. But in order for that to be revealed, we have got to descend into exile and then go through that rectification process, which is ascend from that depth. And once we reach once we complete that ascension, once we complete that rectification, it will be final redemption. Okay? Let's go back. So these are all really important things to note and understand. Can't remember where we got to. Probably point 2 then. Bullet point 2. Yeshua, who is the Yechida, so this is the level of Keter, is called, Yechida is equal to 37, which is also Yeshu, ordinally is 37. This is the soul level of Keter crown. It descends into Edomite exile, and it's the inner inner dimension of the Torah. So the Keter is the inner dimension of the Torah, but it's got an inner and outer aspect. The outer aspect is Da'ath. The inner aspect, obviously, is the inner name of the name Yod He Vav He, which is the 13 attributes of mercy in the book of Micah, a revelation of the absolute mercy of the name Yod He Vav He. Okay, so within the book of, within the revelation in Exodus, there is still an aspect of judgment revealed in the book of there is still some judgment, quite harsh judgments revealed in the Torah of Moshiach. Okay, but the inner aspect of that is complete, total mercy. That is the Torah of Moshiach. This is what Yeshua taught. This is why he was able to even forgive somebody caught in the act of adultery. You know, we're talking about a level of mercy that transcends Torah. Okay, it transcends the Torah of Moshe, the written letter of the law. It transcends the written letter of the law. It's a level of absolute, complete mercy. That's the inner dimension to the Torah. Okay, it's a complete, total, and utter, and absolute revelation of mercy. You know, and this is what was revealed through Yeshua. This is what happens when people like me, who according to the letter of the law should have been shown no favour or mercy whatsoever, I should have been suffering on account of my sins forever, I should have had absolutely no way of gaining access to the name Yod He Vav He at all, yet a provision was made for me. The Moshiach descended into the exile and suffered for me, in order to allow my soul to reconnect to the name Yod He Vav He. Okay? And I didn't connect initially to the name Yod He Vav He as revealed through the Torah of Moshe. I connected at the higher level of absolute mercy. Because there's absolutely no way would I have been able to gain access to the name Yod He Vav He through the outer the Torah of Moshe, because I was a sinner. I had no way of accessing that according to the letter of the law. So I hope you understand what I'm talking about. There is an inner aspect. With the name Yod He Vav is the inner reality of the entire Torah. Okay, but there's an inner aspect to that which is complete, total, and absolute mercy, and that was revealed through Yeshua. Okay, and his soul descending into exile to suffer for us, to bear our burdens, to suffer for our sins and our transgressions, and through him we gain access to those absolute exalted levels of mercy. And that's I'm a witness to that, and most of the Christians are, but they wouldn't be able to talk about it and tell you in these terms because they're not aware of it. They're just told, well, he's God. Jesus is God. What they're really saying is that we gained access to the name Yod He Vav He through Yeshua. Okay, that he is what brought them access to the name Yod He Vav He, and that's where it's very difficult when you experience that transforming power and revelation of the name Yod He Vav He. It's very difficult when that is exiled into Edomite exile to interpret that with any sense of reality. You don't actually know what's happened. It's Jesus is God. Of course he is, because he's provided a revelation to the highest levels of mercy that are attainable. And you've experienced and been awoken to and attached to those very, very profound high levels of mercy that transcend the letter of the law. And you are very, very aware of this life-transforming revelation, and this to be made conscious of that, it just changes your life forever. It changes your life forever. But then, we're still in exile, and over time, the consciousness of that experience, you start going to the church, you start trying to interpret it, but it's within the context of exile. All these lies and things like this, very difficult to maintain that connection to that experience and to that revelation. You slowly come down into the depths of exile again, but you do remember it. You have a trace of that experience, okay? So this is the highest, this is the Torah, this is a Torah of Moshiach. This is the stick of Yosef, okay? And then these ultimately must be brought together, but we're talking about much higher levels of mercy. There needs to be higher levels of mercy, okay? I'm not even kidding you. The sort of sin that I was guilty of, I mean, there's people a lot worse than me. There was murderers and things like that. But I mean, I was so unconscious of God. I was so unconscious of humanity. I was so self-centered. It's unbelievable. I was in the depth of my own self-egotistical, narcissistic exile. You know, it's just gross levels of separation from any consciousness of the name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. So I'm a witness that this happened to me, and I'm also a witness that it's very difficult to interpret that, because no Jews are coming along and telling you what's happening, by the way. You're getting told by Christians what's happened, and you're reading the New Testament to find out what's happened, and this is problematic. Okay, so this is an experience within the context of exile. So you experience awakening, and then unfortunately you fall back asleep again, because you're then subject to exile all over again. So we need to connect to all this, the power of truth to overcome all the forces of exile. It's ultimately the truth that overcomes the forces of exile. And I'm sick of suffering from exile, by the way. I'm sick of it. I have suffered. I don't know about anybody else, but I have suffered as a consequence of ignorance and lack of knowledge. Lack of knowledge to understand exactly what's gone on. I have suffered. And lots of other people are. Thirsty people who just want to know the truth, who can't figure it, the head from the tail. It's an horrendous situation. And when you come from a place like me where you question a lot, but there's absolutely no answers, and then you go against the Erev Rav, who were in charge of the Torah of Moshiach at this time, and they just batter you when you're trying your hardest to understand what's going on, and with this false sense of superiority, and they treat you like something worse on the bottom of the foot. Honestly, this is exile. And that my experience of going towards Judaism was harsh. It was not pleasant. It was extremely harsh. I was battered, and battered hard. And I was only wanting to know the truth. I was wanting to figure out exactly what had happened to me, because it was that life transforming. It woke me up, and I felt like I couldn't connect to it again. I was thrown into the depths of exile again after it, and I was wanting to know, well, I need to know how to get back. Led me towards the Jewish people. Utter and absolutely slaughtered me from start to finish. I was 7 years trying to convert to Judaism. It's all the will of Hashem, though. I had to go against those forces of Erev Rav. You know, and I am not the only one. I mean, this is a very, 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 very common story for people who've tried to walk away from the exile of Christianity, and have questioned Christianity and gone towards Judaism and Torah, only to be savagely ripped apart there. So my teachings are born out of the fact that I've suffered from both Edomite exile. You know, the left foot of fellowship. I'm sure pretty much a lot of people who are listening to this have experienced that. And then the left hand of Judaism, you get slapped up and down with that. Because they're supposed to push away with the left, grab with the right hand, push away with the left hand. Well, they do a lot of pushing away with the left hand, let me tell you. That is what is dominant. There are a lot of slapping down. And, you know, you get the left-hander fellowship from the Jewish people, the vast majority of people who are like myself. And I had even abandoned, for 7 years, I'd abandoned my faith in Yeshua based on all the errors and inconsistency within Christianity. Okay, so this exile is savage. This turns people away. People actually abandon their faith and become atheists. People who have experienced the highest levels of mercy of the name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh and end up atheists. Okay, because they've suffered the left foot of fellowship from the the Christians, and the right, the left hand of the left hand of fellowship from Jews. And they end up atheist people who have received a revelation of the name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, the inner dimension of the Torah. And it's unbelievable. And that is the depth of exile in which we are exiled. We are definitely at the 49th level. We are definitely. For that to happen is unexcusable, but it's happening at a rapid rate. At a rapid rate, and I know it. I've felt it, and that I'm not blaming all Jewish people, by the way, because no, all the wisdom that I've managed to get has come through the hard work of Jewish people. Okay, so there is a light trapped within that, with the outer husks of the Erev Rav. There's a light trapped within that is glorious. As is there is a light trapped within Christianity. The light is the name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. It is very difficult to get that to find expression at this time in exile. So what do we get? We get the outer husks instead, because they're what dominate. Okay, but just because they dominate doesn't mean to say that the whole story, every single bit of wisdom that I've got, everything basically has come from Jewish people. Even me coming back to Judaism, back to a belief in Yeshua, it was a Jewish man, an Orthodox Jewish man in Jerusalem that brought me back. It was his teachings that didn't fully convict me. It was the name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh that brought me back, but it was definitely a massively important part of my return, if you like. And where I am today, I wouldn't be without having connected to him and his teachings. And other great rabbis, Ramchal, Rabbi Nachman, everything has conspired to bring me to where I am today. Okay? Including all this negative stuff that I've had to battle with. And so I'm talking at a macrocosmic level. This is just my life, and I know that this is the same for many other people. So macrocosmically, this is what's happening too. We've got these problems with Erev Rav, with the outer inner aspect is descended into Erev Rav, and the inner aspect is descended into Edom. Those two aspects of the name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh need to be brought together as one. Okay, one stick, and that is Moshiach ben David. And let's have a look. Yeah, Moshe incarnates as Moshiach ben David. Inner and outer inner Torah united as one, elevated from exile. It is all one concept, a revelation of the name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. One stick. Moshiach ben David rectified the tree of life. That's where we're going, folks. It's quite exciting to consider these things. Okay, I'm just going to put up this. I've used it in previous teachings, the Torah of Moshe in exile. This is just so that we know that I'm not just talking out of a hole in the back of my neck. Right, the Agadot on the surface appears as weighted expressions, God forbid, yet within them are concealed all the secrets. The main secret is, well, there's only one secret, Yeshua, Moshiach ben Yosef, by the way. There's only one secret. It's a vast secret, and it's a vast concept, but it's one. Okay, this is alluded to in the verse, and he is afflicted because of our sins, from Isaiah 53:5. This passage, behold, my servant will prosper, and he is afflicted because of our sins, is referring to Moshe. It's also referring to Yeshua. Okay, because Yeshua is Moshe, but this time he's elevated up to the level of Yechida, Moshiach ben Yosef. So it's one of the same thing. The intention is that due to the sins of the bitter waters, Me Merivah, it was decreed upon Moshe that the Torah of Moshe, his holy teachings, would be desecrated by being clothed in forms such as these superficially strange Akkadic tales, which have a place for the scoffers in each generation to belittle them. In yellow now, this is what Moshe petitioned for God, not to conceal the secrets of the Torah in these forms, but it was not granted to him. This is the matter of Moshe's death and his burial outside the land of Israel. In the future, the secrets within them will be revealed, and this is the new Torah that will be revealed in the future. That's from the Vilna Gaon in Evan Shlemer. Okay, and I got that from a book called The Secret Doctrine of the Vilna Gaon, Volume 2. Right, so very interesting, this whole concept of the Torah of Moshe in exile. The Torah of Moshiach is also in exile, just as I've said. This is the level of Da'ath in exile in Erev Rav, the level of Keter, the inner revelation of the Torah in Edomite exile. Okay, simultaneously. So we still got problems with Erev Rav. We've still got problems with, we're still in Edomite exile. And at one point, redemption for the Torah of Moshe and the Torah of Moshiach will occur. The redemption of the soul of Moshe and the soul of Moshiach ben Yosef. Okay, so that will fully incarnate. And the Torah of the supernal dat will fully incarnate, and Keter will fully incarnate, and supernal dat was incarnate in Moshe, supernal Keter was incarnate in Mashiach ben Yosef, and the final incarnation will be Mashiach ben David, okay, which is the soul level of higher, okay, and that's the soul level that's associated with the rectified Moshiach ben David. Okay, so all these, like I say, the Kabbalistic concepts, and I can't say that I understand them just from Kabbalistically alone. I understand them because I've experienced them. I understand them because I've lived them. That's the base. That's where I'm coming from. I'm not spewing out intellectual knowledge. These are things I have personally experienced in my journey of faith. Everything I talk about, I have experienced. It's not theory. I'm a living example of those Kabbalistic concepts. In my life, I have experienced these things. So I've experienced Erev Rav, I've experienced Edomite exile, I've experienced the revelation of the name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh at the highest level of mercy and through the Torah of Moshe. I've experienced all those things that I'm talking about now, and I am not the only one. So these are happening at a microcosmic level, like my life, and they are happening also at the macrocosmic level, i.e., the name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is what's descended into exile. The name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh at the level of Moshe, Da'at, has descended into exile, and we need to elevate our consciousness of the name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh up, because in exile we're not conscious of the name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. So we need to elevate ourselves up to be conscious of the name. That means going up those 125 steps of the ladder. Okay, so I've talked about that way, way, way longer than I hoped. So now let's go and have a look at something that's really interesting. Okay, so now we've got this. Now we've got the understanding of this whole ascent and descent, the inner and outer dimensions of the Torah. The name of Moshiach, the name of Yod-Heh-Vav is revealed to Moshe and as revealed in the book of Micah. Okay, so we've gone through those concepts. Now let's have a look at this, because we need to find out then if there's something that's ascending and something descending. We need to understand what that actually is. And this is utterly brilliant. Okay, so this is where it really, really starts to get interesting. We've now got this situation where we've thoroughly analysed the concept of ascending and descending, and the exile of the Torah of Moshe, the exile of the Torah of Moshiach. Okay, and then we've got this very curious verse in Proverbs, and if you followed my teachings at all, we've come across this verse many, many times. So let's just go through it, because it's unbelievably wonderful. Right, so it's from Proverbs 34, and it's who has ascended into heaven and descended. Now this is a key critical text. Okay, who gathered the wind in his fists? Who wrapped the waters in a garment? Who established all the ends of the earth? What is his name, and what is the name of his son, if you know? Okay, so first thing that I'd like to point out is that who has ascended into heaven and descended is comes to an ordinal of 153. Okay, the highlighted letters spell Me'esav. So from Esav, that means basically. And it's got an ordinal value of 56, Teshuva, which is exactly the same as the ordinal for Teshuva. So we have got this concept of descending. Where do we descend? Into Esav. Okay, where do we need to get? Where do we need to ascend from? We need to come back from Esav, from this Edomite exile, and this is a process called Teshuva, which is a rectification, which is going up all those 120 steps of the ladder from the bottom to the top. Okay, and then we get out of exile, we enter into that state of redemption, final redemption, where we're elevated up, and our soul has attained the level of Moshiach ben David, and we come under the one shepherd, Moshiach ben David. Okay, and the stick of the Torah of Moshe and the Torah of Moshiach are united as one stick. Okay, the inner and the outer aspect of the name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is perfectly, completely and totally united as one. Okay, right, so we've got that little bit that it comes to 153. The regular of it is 765. So the regular of who has ascended into heaven and descended is 765, which is also 5 times 153. Okay, we're going to have a look at this significance of this 153, by the way. So this is a really important number. If we go down to point B, then we've also got. Let me just change that to B's. Point B, we've also got who has ascended into heaven and descended into heaven. And instead of highlighting the initial letter from the word who, so the word who in Hebrew is me, it's mem and yud. Okay, so if we highlight the letter mem, we get from Esav is the initial letters, as in we need redeeming from Esav. The Torah of Moshiach needs redeeming from Esav. The Torah of Moshe needs redeeming from Esav. The name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, our consciousness of the name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh needs redeeming from Esav. Okay, so from our evil inclination. This is what suppresses consciousness of the name Yod-Heh-Vav. It restricts consciousness of the Yod-Heh-Vav. We become conscious of evil, something other than Yod-Heh-Vav. We become conscious of the concealment of the name Yod-Heh-Vav. Exile conceals the name Yod-Heh-Vav, and that's what we're conscious of, concealment. We need to be conscious of revelation. Okay, so if we change the letters, instead of the mem highlighted, the yud of the word who, okay, which is who is connected to the level of Bina, which is where we're wanting to get to. Bina is the second letter of the name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. It's what the word Teshuva is connected to. Teshuv, He, return of the letter He. So the final letter He has got to be returned back to the level of the first letter He, which is Bina, which is understanding. Okay, so that word who is very significant in itself. So the first letter is mem and the second letter is yod. So if we highlight the yod instead of the mem, then the letters for who has ascended into heaven and descended spell Yeshua. Okay, they're not in order, but the yod, ayin, shin and vav rearranged to spell Yeshua. Okay, so that's very interesting. Who has ascended and descended? Yeshua. He has descended into Esav. Who is Yeshua? Yeshua is Moshe. Yeshua is Moshe. Moshe elevated up to the level of Moshiach ben Yosef. And Moshe's soul fully incarnated into Yeshua. And then through Eliyahu Hanavi, who was John the Baptist, was elevated up from a state of desolation to a state of, he attained the level of Moshiach. Moshiach ben Yosef. He attained the letter, he attained the revelation of the name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh at the level of Keter, which is the thorn of the letter Yod. It's at the level, so he attained the soul level Yechida. Okay, and then he had to descend again. Yeshua had to descend. Yeshua is Moshe. Okay, so let's go and have a look at that point C then. So the life of Moshe was 120 years. The life of Yeshua is 30 years. So Yeshua was baptized at 30. Okay, he was baptized, he was immersed, he was mikved, and he received the Ruach HaKodesh at 30 years old. He began his ministry and he died 3 years later. He was crucified 3 years later. So together, so they was 33. Okay, AD 33 is when he died. The most likely date of his death, I've gone over this before. This is the astronomical calculations. I think that it was Isaac Newton that did them, and the date that is most likely is the 14th that he died was the 14th of Pesach, AD 33. So he was 33 years old. This is what we can glean from the writings of the New Testament. Okay, so 120 plus 33 is 153. Who ascended and descended? We know Moshe ascended into heaven. He ascended into heaven to get the Torah. We know after Yeshua was baptized, he went through the 40 days of testing also in the desert up against Hasatan, without food and drink and things like that. So he also ascended, but he ascended after he died. He ascended into heaven. And then he descended again, and we've got this whole story of the 153 fishes in the Dragnet. So he actually descended, and his disciples, he descended and he reappeared to his disciples on a few occasions. And this particular occasion, his disciples had been fishing all night long. They managed to catch nothing. And then this man stood at the side of the shore and asked him, have you caught anything? No, we haven't caught anything. He says, throw your net over the right-hand side of the boat. And they caught 153 fish. And then they realised that this man was the Lord. But he can't have been in the same body as what he died, because his body had died. Okay, his soul had been incarnated into somebody else's body. Okay, and then he left this incredible parable about the 153 fishes in the Dragnet. It was all codes. Okay, and I've pointed this out before. If you go look at Christian theology to find out answers for this 153 fishes in the Dragnet, there's nowhere where you can see it. There's no mention to it. Okay. You have no idea what the 153 fishes mean. The 153 fishes are this. It was a code that was left in the New Testament that we need to decode now. So it was what is referring to. He's referring to the fact that he has to descend into Esav, and he's going to need to be redeemed from Esav. He has to descend he has to descend for the sake of ascent. He has to descend into exile. So Yeshua has come back and told his disciples and left them this incredible coded message that, we're decoding it now. I've decoded it. This is something that I've even been able to decode. Okay, because I've got the understanding of the Hebrew and I've related it back to this and joined up all the dots numerically. So it's not too difficult when you start to look at things numerically. Okay, so anyway, life of Moshe and life of Yeshua comes to 153. Right, so let's just carry on and looking at making this connection between Yeshua and Moshe. So we have this incredible coded message, like I say, from the New Testament that we can now decode, and we understand it in terms of the ascent and the descent. So basically he was telling his disciples, I am on my way down into exile. Okay, so he appeared to them in this incarnated form. It wasn't in his normal body because they didn't recognize him at first. They recognized his soul. Okay, they recognized his soul, that it was the soul of Yeshua, and then they knew it was the Lord. That's the words used in the New Testament, Master. Okay, so anyway, let's read on point D then. He sent Moshe his servant which comes to Shlach, which is Shlach Moshe Avdo, okay, or Avdo it is. So that comes to 765, which, if we look at point A, is the regular for who has ascended into heaven and descended. We know Moshe ascended into heaven. He ascended into heaven to get the Torah, and then he came back down, and it was because the Erev Rav had made the golden calf. Okay, so he had ascended into heaven and descended, and then he had to go back up into heaven and get the second set of tablets that were a little not as holy. Okay, so we've got this ascending and descending and ascending and descending, this whole process of ascending for the sake of descending for the sake of ascent kind of thing. So we've got the connection between Moshe ascending into heaven and descending on account of the Erev Rav, and then this same concept, Moshiach Yeshua had to ascend into the heaven, and he descended for the sake of the nations, okay, for the sake of Esav. Just as Moshe desired to see Erev Rav rectified, that the soul level of Mashiach ben Yosef desires to see the nations rectified, because there's a reason why I keep saying this. Esav has got the numerical value of 376, which is Shalom. The only vessel that can contain blessing is one of Shalom. So Esav needs rectifying in order to be able to receive the full blessing that Yod Heh Vav Heh desires to bestow. Okay, he desires to fill the entire earth with the revelation of the glory of his name. Okay, how's that possible if you've got the whole of the nations not aware? Okay, he desires, so the nations have got to be aroused also, and plus in the nations there's the lost of the house of Israel that need redeeming. So there's more than one aspect. He came for the lost of the house of Israel, which had descended into the nations. So there's all kinds of concepts, but the descent is for the sake of ascent. It's for the sake of rectification. That's what that means. It's rectifying the vessels of Esav from the chaotic state into a state of shalom that is then a viable vessel to contain the blessing that the name Yod Heh Vav Heh desires to bestow, which is a revelation of his complete and total, utter, absolute authority and unity. Oneness is utter and absolute perfection. Okay, so he sent Moshe, his servant, comes to 765, which is exactly the same as point A, 765, which is 5 times 153. Okay, so whichever way you look at it, it's 153. This is how significant it is, and this is the way that Hashem has made all these connections through this one number, 153. Okay, so you can see then, point D, the initial letters spell Shema. So the initial letters he sent Moshe's servant are Shin, Mem, and Ayin, which is Shema. Okay, so if we go and have a look at the word Shema, it means hear. And this is also a word. Hashem did not hear Moshe when he was pleading. Okay, and he said, Rav Lach, it is enough for you. He didn't hear Moshe's pleading. And that word used in that verse is Shema. Okay, so here now we've got, in he sent Moshe's servant, this was Yod Heh Vav Heh's hearing. He sent Moshe into exile. He sent Moshe into exile. Okay, in order to get the 50th gate of understanding, which understanding is connected to Shema, hearing. The letter Bina is associated with the sense of hearing, Shema. It's all connected in the most glorious, perfect way. So let's go and have a look at this word Shema then. Hear comes to 410 regularly, plus 50 ordinarily, the 50th gate of understanding, the level that Moshe needs to attain. Okay, so he has to become the Shema. He has to become the Shema through this process of rectification. Okay, so that together comes to 460. Right, so the 410, which is the regular, is 10 times 41. And 41 is Kisei David, the ordinal of Kisei David, which is David's throne, which is Moshiach ben Yosef. Okay? So, where was he sent? He was sent to be Moshiach ben Yosef. He was sent to create David's throne. That's what that's saying ultimately, isn't it? Shema. He sent Moshe, his servant. He sent him to what? He sent him into exile in order to elevate himself up to the 50th level of understanding. Okay, and through that process create the very throne that Moshiach ben David sits upon. And what is that throne? It's Moshiach ben Yosef, the entire process of the ascension from a place of descent. Okay, so 50th gate, so to attain the face-to-face revelation of the name Yod He Vav He. Okay, Yod He Vav He, one way of looking at it is like this. Okay, so Yod He Vav He could reveal himself, but you cannot see Yod He Vav He. Just as he revealed himself, he said, right, you sit in a rock and I'll pass by. This is all Yod He Vav He revealing himself to Moshe. But the 50th gate is something to do with Moshe himself earning the right to see that name. Through all this toil with exile, it's the difference between showing the name Yod He Vav He and working and fighting all these concealments in order for you to create a process that ultimately reveals the name Yod He Vav He. So there's a difference between showing the name Yod He Vav He, which is like a back-to-back relationship, isn't it? But you fighting against all these forces of concealment in order for you yourself to be part of that process to reveal the name Yod He Vav He. There's a big difference, and this is the difference between 49 gates where you understand Yod He Vav He from the back, and then that 50th gate where you've gone through all those processes of rectification to come face to face with the name Yod He Vav He, face to face relationship with the name Yod He Vav He. 460 point F then is 5 times 92, and 92 is Moshiach ben David ordinally. Okay, rectified with the additional Yod. So all these things are all wonderful connections that we need to make. Okay, so this next point G then, this is a term that's used to describe the 49th level of impurity, which is the absolute pit of exile. Okay, if we reach the 50th gate, if we reach the 50th level of impurity, we couldn't return from that place. We can only return from the 49th level. This was the level of impurity that was that they descended to in Egypt, and it's the same. We will descend there again. Once we've reached that absolute pit of the 49th level of impurity, that means we are the level least conscious of the name Yod He Vav He. We're totally and utterly not conscious at all of the name Yod He Vav He. This means very low and degraded. Shifla me'od. Okay, shifla is like low, and me'od is very. Okay, so that also comes to regular of 460, which is exactly the same as Shema. Okay, regularly. It comes to an ordinal of 73, which is Chochmah. We know that the ordinal of the luminaries, the two luminaries, is also 73. So the luminaries spelt correctly is 658. We've gone through this a lot, which is also Nachman Ma'uman. The overall total of Nachman Ma'uman is 658. Okay, so this here, and 658 is the regular value of the luminaries when it's spelt in a rectified state. So with the two missing vowels, so the luminaries, which are Moshiach ben Yosef and Moshiach ben David, which we pointed out last lesson, which is Moshe and Yeshua. Okay. So what's that telling us? Because I'm getting a bit lost. All right, so the luminaries, they've got an ordinal value also of 73. So together they come to 731. So it's connected to the Nachman Ma'uman. It's connected to this concept. It's connected to the concept of Shema. It's connected to the concept of he sent Moshe, his servants. It's connected to the concept of ascending and descending into exile. And it's connected to the fact that Yeshua and Moshe are the same. And the final revelation as Moshiach ben David, it's the same soul Moshe. He's the Redeemer. Okay, let's go on at this then. So we've already got this connection to David's throne, Moshiach, which is Moshiach ben Yosef. So if we add 460 plus 73, which is the ordinal here, and it's also the ordinal of the luminaries, like I've just pointed out, which is the two Mashiachim, which is Moshe and Yeshua, okay, which is which is one soul ultimately at different levels, different soul levels. Okay, so that comes to 533, which is 13 times 41. Okay, so 13 is your 13 attributes of mercy. It's your echad, oneness. It's ahava, love. There's 2 times 13 equals 26, yod he vav he. All these concepts. 4 times 13 equals 52, which is Mashiach. Okay, the ordinal for Moshiach. So all these concepts, and then we've got the concept of 41, Kisei David, that's ordinal for Kisei David, David's throne. So this state of being brought low precedes the revelation of Moshiach. That's what Rashi said. We have to be taken to the very, very pit of exile, and in that very low, degraded state, we are redeemed. Okay? That precedes the revelation of Moshiach. We have to be taken down to the very lowest level. And that's Rashi's comment on Sanhedrin 98a. Okay? So this whole process of exile, going right down. When we reach the very pit, just as they reached the very pit in Egypt, from that place of absolute complete lowness, totally and absolutely degraded to the lowest possible level, that is when we get the revelation of Moshiach. Okay, Moshiach ben David this time, the final Redeemer, and it's very much connected to the throne of Moshiach ben Yosef. Why? Because we've got to extract the lost sparks of holiness that are lost in that level of impurity, and this is the soul of Moshiach ben Yosef that goes down into exile to that depth in order to redeem those lost sparks of holiness at that level. And this is the whole concept of Moshiach's